The older I grow, the quieter my heart becomes, but some memories refuse to fade. Even now, at 75, when I sit by the window of my little house and watch the evening buses crawl toward the border on the TV, I can feel the sting of that day as if it were yesterday. The day my family told me, "You'll carry our bags or walk home." My name is Farida Begum, and once upon a time, I thought love could make a person blind to cruelty. I was wrong. It all began on a cold morning 5 years ago, when my son Amir announced that his visa had been approved. "Amy, we're finally moving abroad," he said, excitement bursting from his eyes. His wife, Syra, beamed beside him, already planning the life they'd live, a new house, a car, and foreign schools for their children. I remember smiling, even though I knew what it would cost. To help them go, I sold the last piece of my husband's legacy, our ancestral home in Lahore. That home carried decades of laughter, prayers, and memories. Every brick had heard my husband's voice. Every wall had witnessed my son's childhood. But for their happiness, I gave it away. I told myself, if my sacrifice can give them a better life, it's worth it. The journey began with promise. We took the train to Karachi, then a bus that would take us near the border. The road stretched endlessly, and I could see the weariness in everyone's faces. But I didn't complain. I sat quietly, holding the small prayer book my husband had once gifted me. Amir barely spoke to me, buried in his phone, while Syra scrolled through pictures of the place she would soon call home. By the time we reached the border crossing, it was almost evening. The air was thick with dust and the noise of hundreds of travelers, each desperate to move forward. I was slow, my knees hurt, and the weight of the bag on my shoulder was too much for my old bones. When I tried to hand it to Amir, he snapped. "Amy, can't you manage this one thing? You'll carry our bags or walk home," he hissed, his voice cold and sharp. I froze. For a second, I thought he was joking, but the look on his face told me otherwise. Syra laughed under her breath, whispering something I couldn't hear. My heart sank deeper than I ever thought possible. I wanted to remind him how many nights I'd stayed hungry so he could eat, how I stitched clothes until my fingers bled to pay his school fees. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I picked up the bag again. My shoulders ached, and the ground beneath my feet blurred from exhaustion. Every step felt like a betrayal, his mine life's. I could hear their laughter behind me, light and carefree, while I stumbled forward, carrying not just their luggage but the weight of all my years of love and sacrifice. As night fell, I sat alone on a bench near the checkpoint. The air smelled of diesel and dust. Families huddled together, sharing food and blankets, while I sat apart, forgotten. I watched the stars appear one by one, and for the first time in my life, I prayed not for their happiness but for strength. That night, a cold realization settled into my heart. I had raised my own strangers, and the woman who once believed love could heal anything learned that some wounds are carved by the very hands you once kissed goodnight. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself, "This will be the last time they make me feel small." The next morning, the sun rose like a burning coin over the horizon, harsh and unforgiving. I hadn't slept at all. I sat on the cold cement near the border post, clutching my shawl tighter around my shoulders as the wind bit through the thin fabric. My son and daughter-in-law were still asleep in the nearby rest area, curled up comfortably under the blanket I had packed for them. I had no blanket of my own. I had given it up so the children wouldn't feel cold during the night. When they finally woke, Syra complained first. "My back hurts," she groaned. "Amir, tell your mother to bring breakfast. The children are starving." I turned to look at her, my mouth half open, but before I could respond, Amir tossed me a few crumpled notes. "Amy, go buy something for them. Tea maybe. And hurry, we don't have time to waste." I nodded quietly, not because I agreed, but because arguing seemed pointless. The nearby food stall smelled of boiled eggs and dusty chai. I handed over the money, realizing it was barely enough for 3 cups. I drank water instead. When I brought the food, Syra didn't even look at me. She handed a cup to Amir and took one for herself. My grandchildren were busy playing with a phone, unaware of anything around them. I sat on the ground, staring at my empty hands. The tea's warmth lingered in the air, but I felt colder than before. As we began to move toward the border checkpoint again, The true weight of everything pressed down on me. The bags, heavy and unbalanced, dug into my shoulders. But heavier still were the memories. The nights I had stayed awake, sewing clothes under a flickering bulb. The years I had gone without new shoes so Amir could wear polished ones to school. The days I sold my jewelry to pay for his university fees abroad. Each memory felt like a stone in those bags. Move faster, Amy, Amir said impatiently, his tone more like a stranger's than a son's. We can't be late. Do you want to get left behind? Left behind. The words cut through me. I looked up at him, sweat trickling down my temple, my breath shallow. Amir, I whispered. You've forgotten how to speak kindly. He didn't even glance back. I'm just being practical, he said. We can't drag you along forever. For a moment, I stopped walking. My legs trembled, but not from fatigue. It was rage, sorrow, disbelief, all blending into something unrecognizable. Syra turned around, smirking slightly. You know, Amy, she said sweetly, maybe once we cross the border, you can stay back with some relatives for a while. It's a lot of work there. We'll call you when things are settled. She didn't mean it. I saw it in her eyes. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal wrapped in polite cruelty. I wanted to shout, to remind them that I was the reason they even had this chance, that every step they took was built upon the sacrifices of my youth. But I stayed silent. The words lodged in my throat like glass. That evening, as the line crawled forward, I was told to wait outside the office while they handled the paperwork. Hours passed. My feet swelled, and the sun scorched my skin. When I asked if they needed help, Syra waved her hand. Please, Amy, you'll just confuse things. Sit quietly. So I sat, outside the border gate, surrounded by strangers, while my own family acted as if I were invisible. It was there, in that endless waiting, that something inside me hardened. I no longer cried. I no longer pleaded. My tears had dried, leaving only a strange calm behind. I began to see things clearly, the arrogance, the entitlement, the selfishness I had nurtured with my own kindness. As the night deepened, I made myself a promise beneath the foreign sky. They may think I am weak because I carry their weight, but they forget. I am the one who gave them the strength to stand. That promise was the seed of what would come next. The moment they'd finally understand who I truly was. The morning began with shouting. Syra was pacing near the border gate, her voice sharp and annoyed. Amir, the line's moving. Tell her to hurry up with the bags. She pointed at me like I was a porter, not a mother. I was crouched on the side, tying my old shoes, their laces thin and frayed. The straps of the bags had cut into my shoulders so deeply that my skin burned. Amir turned toward me with impatience in his eyes. Amy, for God's sake, you're so slow. We told you already, if you can't carry the luggage, just go back. Go back. The words settled into me, not as a command but as clarity. For days I had been swallowing my hurt, convincing myself that once we crossed that border, everything would change, that they would soften, that they would remember. But standing there, dusty, hungry, unseen, I finally realized something. They weren't ashamed of how they treated me. They believed they were right. I looked at my son, my only child, and saw a stranger. His face, once so tender when he was small, was now hardened by greed and pride. The woman beside him, who used to call me Amy John with sweetness, now looked at me like I was a stain she wanted to wipe away. Something inside me cracked, but it wasn't pain this time. It was freedom. I stood slowly, my knees trembling, but my heart steady. I placed the bags carefully on the ground near them. Amir frowned. What are you doing? I met his eyes. You said I could carry your bags or walk home, I said softly. So I'm choosing. For a moment they didn't understand. Syra laughed. You're joking, right? Where will you even go? I didn't answer. I simply turned and started walking toward the opposite side, the road leading back toward the buses that went home. Amy, Amir called after me. There was a flicker of confusion in his tone. But I kept walking. My back straightened with every step. My shawl fluttered in the wind, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a burden. Amy, stop, he shouted again. You can't just leave like this. That's when I turned just for a moment and said quietly, I already did. He took a step forward, but Syra grabbed his arm. Let her go, she snapped. She'll come running back once she realizes she can't survive without us. But I didn't come back. The bus station was a few kilometers away. The road was uneven, my legs were weak, and yet I felt lighter than ever before. The air smelled of dust and diesel, but to me it smelled like freedom. When I reached the small transport office, the driver looked at me curiously. "Amma, you came alone?" I nodded. "I'm going home," I said simply. He smiled faintly. "You're brave." I didn't feel brave, only empty. But inside that emptiness, something new began to bloom. Peace. As the bus rumbled forward, I looked out the window. Far in the distance, I could see the silhouettes of Amir and Syra standing near the gate. They were waving their arms, shouting something. It took me a moment to realize they had just discovered the truth. All the property papers, all the money I had withdrawn from the sale of our house, the legal documents for inheritance, they were still in the side pocket of my bag. The bag that I had carried all along. The bag I took with me. Their faces twisted in panic as the bus pulled away. Syra was yelling, Amir was trying to run after it. But I didn't wave. I didn't even blink. I just leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. For years, I had carried the weight of their dreams. Now for the first time, I was carrying my own destiny, light, steady, and entirely mine. That was the moment I left them at the border. Not just in body, but in every way that mattered. And though I was leaving with nothing but my old bag and broken heart, I knew deep down that I had taken everything that truly belonged to me. The silence in that bus felt sweeter than any apology they could ever offer. It's been 15 years since that day at the border, yet every detail still glows sharp in my memory. The heat, the noise, their laughter, and finally, the silence when I walked away. Now at 75, I sit on my veranda surrounded by blooming jasmine and the laughter of children who call me Nanny. Not by blood, but by choice. Life, I learned, has a way of giving you back what you lose, but in a different form. When I returned home, I had nothing but the bag I carried. Inside were a few clothes, my husband's prayer beads, and the folder of property papers, the same documents Amir and Syra had planned to use to buy a house abroad. I remember holding those papers close to my chest that night, trembling with anger and grief. At first, I wanted revenge. I wanted to see them suffer, to see them crawling back to me in shame. But as the days passed, my anger began to change shape. It wasn't fury anymore. It was resolve. I realized that revenge didn't have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes it could be quiet, graceful, and lasting. I sold a small portion of the land and used the money to rebuild my husband's old house, the one I had sacrificed for them. This time, I rebuilt it not as a family home, but as a shelter for women. Abandoned mothers, widows with nowhere to go, daughters cast out for wanting to study. They found a place under my roof. We called it Neizindagi, new life. Each woman who came to me carried her own kind of pain, her own story of betrayal. And in helping them heal, I began to heal too. Years went by. Word of the shelter spread. We started teaching sewing, embroidery, and small business skills. The same needle that had once stitched my son's school uniforms now stitched new beginnings for women who had been told they were worthless. Every thread was a prayer, every finished piece a quiet act of defiance against the cruelty of those who abandoned us. Then one day a letter arrived. It was from Amir. The handwriting was shaky, the tone desperate. They had never made it across the border. Their documents were confiscated for being incomplete, and they were forced to return home penniless. He begged for forgiveness, saying they had realized their mistakes and wanted to see me again. I read that letter several times. My heart wavered. After all, he was still my son. But then I remembered that border, that laughter, that cruel command. You'll carry our bags or walk home. I wrote back just one line. I walked home, Amir. And I arrived just fine. I never heard from him again. Maybe he couldn't forgive me for not forgiving him. Or maybe he finally understood what he had lost. Either way, the silence between us became my peace. Now, when I look at the faces of the women and children who fill this house, I don't feel lonely. They call me Ammi, Nanny Dottie. Their affection is untainted by greed or pride. My life, which once felt like a shadow, has found its light again. Sometimes at sunset, I take out my old prayer beads and whisper, "Thank you, Allah, for showing me the worth of my pain." Because if that betrayal hadn't happened, I would still be carrying their weight, their dreams, their insults, their arrogance. My revenge wasn't in making them suffer. It was in proving that I could rise without them. And that, I learned, is the sweetest revenge of all. To live well, with dignity, while those who tried to break you fade into the distance of your past. I no longer carry their bags. I carry stories, hope, and the strength of every woman who was told she wasn't enough. And every night, as the jasmine fills the air, I smile softly and whisper to myself, I left them at the border, but I crossed into freedom.